What is knowledge? According to Locke, knowledge is a perception of the connection and agreement or disagreement and incompatibility of any ideas. There are 4 kinds of agreement or disagreement of ideas. Number 1, identity or diversity. It perceives ideas and knows what they are and what they are not. Without this active of the mind, there could be no knowledge, reasoning, imagination, and distinct thoughts. Number 2, relation. The mind perceives between 2 ideas. This is how we acquire positive knowledge, by perceiving relations among them. Number 3, coexistence. Coexistence or non-coexistence in the same subject. Number 4, real existence. Existence of something actual that agrees with the idea. For example, that God exists. Types of knowledge. Actual knowledge, the present view the mind has on the agreement or disagreement of any of its ideas and their relations. Habitual knowledge. Once we perceive the agreement or disagreement of an idea, we store it in our memory and we reflect immediately on it. Our finite minds can only think distinctively on one thing at a time. We would be very ignorant if we wouldn't be able to store things in our mind. Degrees of habitual knowledge. Demonstrative knowledge. Truths which the mind was once convinced and retains the memory of conviction, but not of the proof. Intuitive knowledge. We immediately perceive the relation between ideas when a truth is called up from our mind. Sensitive knowledge. Knowledge of the existence of particular external objects, though the perception and consciousness we have of the actual interest of ideas from our senses. Ignorance. Lack of ideas. All simple ideas are confined to those received from sensation and reflection. Lack of discoverable connection between ideas we have. Incapable of universal and certain knowledge. So we must rely on observation and experiment. Lack of tracing our ideas. Lack of tracing and finding intermediate ideas that we can demonstrate which ideas agree or disagree.
What is truth? What all mankind is searching for. Truth is the joining or separating of signs according to whether the things signified agreed or disagreed with one another. Mental propositions. A mental proposition is nothing but a bare consideration of ideas as they are in our mind. When we reason within ourselves, we use mental propositions. Verbal propositions are made up of words and the signs of our ideas. When we want to make a proposition about more complex ideas, we usually put the name in place of the idea, since they are more clear, certain, and distinct. Truth, as well as knowledge, may be divided into verbal and real. Verbal truth is merely what we have. Terms are joined accordingly to the agreement or disagreement of ideas they stand for. And real truth is when these signs are joined accordingly to our ideas, agree corresponding to those ideas can exist in nature. Maxims are self-evident knowledge. Some cons for maxims are that they do not enlarge knowledge and do not help in the advancement of our sciences, and they cannot confirm self-evident propositions. Some pros are that they are effective in the teaching of the sciences and can be used to limit arguments. Trifling propositions are propositions that add no light to our understanding without expanding our knowledge. There are 2 types: identical propositions that provide no news and they assert knowledge that we already know, and general, which are about substance. When they are certain, they are the most trifling.
According to Locke, intuition gives us knowledge that we exist, while demonstration gives us knowledge that God exists, and sensation gives us knowledge of the existence of other things. In terms of intuition, it is to be had only by sensation. In other words, doubting. Doubting oneself, which is a very basic Cartesian argument. In terms of demonstration, Locke means reasoning. Through reason, one can discover that God exists. In terms of sensation, Locke describes the senses and how the senses can be used as one form of knowledge. According to Locke, he believes we are capable of knowing without a doubt that there is a God because he has provided us with the tools to know him and discover him. Moreover, he also knows that nothing cannot produce a being, therefore something must be there eternal, and he knows this by an intuitive certainty. In addition, that eternal being must be powerful. Lastly, our reason leads us to the knowledge of this certain, evident truth that there is an eternal, most powerful, and most knowing being. In addition, according to Locke, there are two sorts of beings, incogitative and cogitative. The former is purely material, without sense, while the latter is typically a sensible, thinking, and perceiving being, which is typically immaterial. It is also important to note that an incognitive being cannot produce a cognitive. Sense, perception, and knowledge must be property eternally inseparable from matter and every particle of it. According to Locke, only by sensation can we have knowledge of the existence of any other thing, while knowledge of ourselves comes through intuition or doubting, and the existence of God comes through reason, or what he calls determination. Locke believes that something external to us exists that causes ideas within us. For example, the whiteness of paper, and us receiving those ideas come through the senses. According to Locke, first, perceptions are produced within us and not in outside things. Second, actual sensations are those that force themselves upon us and we cannot avoid having, versus memories. Third, the actual pleasure or pain felt during sensations are not within our memories. For example, feeling hot or cold is very different from remembering how cold or hot you felt. Lastly, our senses assist one another in providing testimony of the existence of outside things. For example, if you see a fire and you are doubting it, you could feel it by putting your hand on it.
Reason is the faculty that separates man from beast. Accordingly, it enlarges our knowledge and regulates our assent through elation, inference, which is the perception of the connection of ideas during deduction, on which most of our knowledge derives, and sagacity, through 4 different degrees: discovering proofs, ordering the proposition of proofs, perceiving connections between propositions, and perceiving a conclusion. Using syllogisms is ill-advised for several reasons. 1. The mind, through reason, can already sense connections of immediate ideas. Moreover, there is no use of it in probabilities. Syllogism is no less fallible than plain argumentation, can actually lead to absurd conclusions. And, the most importantly, syllogisms do not increase knowledge, rather they dispute knowledge. However, we cannot say that reason is just as good as syllogisms, because reason can make us easily puzzled. We cannot perceive intermediate ideas, and sometimes we have lacunas of knowledge due to uncertain signs that puzzle us. While the highest form of knowledge is intuitive knowledge, with reasoning we can form 2 other forms of knowledge, which is rational knowledge, which is when you connect 2 ideas through demonstration, and judgment, when you connect 2 ideas to the frequency of that connection, how much it appears. With reason, we have 4 different types of arguments used to silence the opposition. There's one where you appeal to authority, one where you appeal to the person's ignorance or lack of a better proof, one where you press your opponent with the consequences of his flawed reasoning, and the best one, which is when you use proofs drawn from your own reason, from the foundations of knowledge. This is the best because it doesn't follow the other ones. Hence, we have 2 distinct methods of knowledge: reason, which we discussed earlier, and faith, which is the assent of a proposition through revelation, which is through God. However, faith and reason must be together, but in some situations, faith may be better than reason, which is when our natural faculties fail and when we are incredibly uncertain. If you love the truth, don't have enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is taking away reason and faith and replacing it with opinion and conduct. Enthusiasm is immediate revelation, which is a false sense of revelation. Error is a mistake of our judgment, which is through the want of proofs that can be easily procured, which springs from intellectual laziness, the want of the ability to use proofs of whom we do not have the mental faculties to do proofs, the want of the will to use proofs of whom those who want proofs show off but actually do not use them, being more intellectually lazy, and the wrongful measures of probability, which will be described in the next slide. Wrongful measures of probability include doubtful and false propositions taken for principles, when opinions are taken as fact despite disproof. The second one is received hypothesis, when one's understanding, out of the need to become an epistemic authority, are placed in a mold and are regurgitated out for the masses. This is a lesser degree of the first. The third one is predominant passions or inclinations, when evading through argument that true propositions have a latent fallacy of words, or that true propositions cannot argue fully against contrary arguments to true propositions. While there's something that you can believe without hardcore proof, in a matter of life and death, you must have such proof. Finally, we have authority, when one believes that men in a position of epistemic authority are always right, which is erroneous. Locke concludes this chapter by giving us the three sciences necessary for knowledge: natural philosophy, or physique, which is the knowledge of things; ethics, or pratique, which is the skill of right for the attainment of things good and useful; and the doctrines of science, semiotics, which is the consideration of the nature of science, typically words, which stem from ideas.